My wife invited her ex to our baby shower and told me, "He's just a friend. You need to grow up." When I overheard him say, "She's finally leaving you after the baby comes," I crashed the cake table. She screamed, "It wasn't supposed to happen like this." I whispered, "But it did. Say goodbye. You don't wake up thinking today is the day your life will break in half." I woke up to sunlight slicing through the blinds in our bedroom, the smell of Aubrey's perfume still clinging to the sheets. It was a Sunday morning in Scranton, Pennsylvania, the kind that usually drifts by slow and easy. I lay there for a minute, staring at the ceiling, feeling the tiny shifts of the baby moving inside her when she shifted next to me. Her hair spilled across the pillow. She was already awake, scrolling on her phone, her face blank. She barely glanced at me. "We gotta be at my parents' by noon," she said, voice thin like worn fabric. I rubbed my face and muttered, "Yeah, I know." That was how most conversations had gone lately. Brief, functional, no extra words. I hauled myself out of bed, joints aching more than they should at 34, and got ready. The diaper cake we'd made was sitting on the kitchen table, wrapped in clear plastic, blue ribbons curling along the edges. I looked at it for a long second before picking it up. It felt heavier than it should have, awkward in my arms. Aubrey barely looked at me as she walked to the car. I followed. The drive to Clark Summit was silent except for the sound of tires on asphalt. I kept sneaking glances at her, trying to read her expression, but she wore the same blank mask she had for weeks. I told myself it was the pregnancy hormones, the stress of the baby coming, the pressure from her parents. I told myself a lot of things. When we pulled into the driveway, the house was already buzzing. Cars lined the street, and colorful balloons bobbed in the breeze. I forced a smile, trying to push away the sense of unease chewing at the edges of my mind. We got out of the car, Aubrey smoothing her dress over her belly, and made our way around back. The yard was done up like a Pinterest board. Banners, pastel decorations, tables loaded with gifts. Family and friends milled around, laughing, clinking glasses. And then I saw him, leaning against the fence like he owned the place, sunglasses perched on his nose, smile too smug by half. "Zane Carter." I stopped walking. "What the hell is he doing here?" I said, keeping my voice low but tight. Aubrey barely paused. "He's just a friend. You need to grow up." The words hit harder than a slap. She didn't even look at me when she said it. She just kept walking, leaving me standing there with the diaper cake slipping in my hands. I set my jaw and followed. The party blurred around me. People came up to say hi, slap me on the back, tell me how excited I must be. I nodded, smiled where I was supposed to, but my eyes kept drifting back to Zane. He was too familiar, too comfortable. At one point, I caught Aubrey laughing at something he said, her hand brushing his arm. The blood rushed to my ears. I tried to shake it off, tried to tell myself it was nothing, but my gut knew better. I made an excuse to head inside, saying I needed a drink. In the kitchen, I poured myself a glass of lemonade, my hands shaking just enough to spill some on the counter. I cursed under my breath, wiping it up with a napkin. That's when I heard it. Their voices. Low, urgent. Through the cracked window leading to the side of the house. "She's finally leaving you after the baby comes," Zane said, his voice oozing with satisfaction. My hand froze mid-wipe. Aubrey's voice came next, hushed and panicked. "Not here, Zane. Please." The world tilted. I set the glass down, but the force cracked it against the counter. The sound rang out, sharp and loud. Nobody in the backyard noticed at first. I walked out the back door slowly, the noise of the party washing over me again, distant and meaningless. I made a beeline for the cake table, the centerpiece of this whole stupid charade. The thing Aubrey had spent 3 nights obsessing over, arranging tiny decorations and icing perfect little letters. I didn't even hesitate. I swung my arm through it. The cake, the decorations, the plates, everything crashing to the ground in a sickly sweet explosion. The music cut off. Gasps echoed. Someone shouted my name. I didn't care. Aubrey rushed toward me, her face twisted in horror. "Caleb, what are you doing?" I stepped closer, so close I could see the smear of mascara under her eyes. Her hands hovered in the air between us, like she wanted to touch me but didn't dare. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this," she sobbed, voice cracking. I leaned in, close enough that only she could hear. "But it did," I whispered. "Say goodbye." She broke. She actually fell to her knees in the grass, sobbing, as her mother and cousins rushed toward her. People were shouting, some yelling at me to leave, others just standing there, stunned. I didn't say another word. I turned around and walked away, leaving the wreckage behind me. The air felt different as I walked down the street. Heavy. Final. I didn't have a plan. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stay there, couldn't stand another second pretending everything was fine. Memories flashed behind my eyes with every step. Our first apartment with the peeling linoleum floors, Aubrey grinning over burnt pancakes, the way her face lit up when she showed me the positive pregnancy test. Were any of those memories even real? Or had I just been the stand-in while she waited for something or someone better? I found myself in front of Mulligan's without even thinking about it. The neon sign buzzed overhead, the smell of old beer and fried food leaking out every time the door swung open. Inside, it was dim and blessedly quiet. A few old-timers hunched over their drinks. Nobody looked twice when I slumped onto a bar stool. The bartender, a guy about my age with a sleeve of tattoos on one arm, slid a beer in front of me without a word. I drank, and tried not to think, but thoughts crept in anyway. About the nursery we'd painted pale green together. About the tiny onesies folded neatly in the dresser. About the ultrasound picture pinned to the fridge. I felt like my whole body was vibrating with rage and sadness and a hollow kind of disbelief. How did I not see it coming? Was I really that blind? Hours passed. At some point, Shauna showed up. She sat down next to me, fiddling with the hem of her sweatshirt. "She's a mess," she said eventually. "And Don is threatening to sue you for ruining the party." I let out a sharp bark of laughter. Figures. She didn't mean for it to happen like this, Caleb. She's just scared. About the baby. About you. About everything. I said nothing. "You should come back," Shauna said quietly. "Talk to her." I turned my empty glass in my hands. "She's scared," I said finally. "She's scared, so she runs to him?" Shauna didn't answer. She didn't have to. After a long time, I pushed off the stool, my legs unsteady. "I'll talk to her," I said. "But not for her. For the kid." Shauna nodded like she knew that was the best offer anyone was going to get out of me tonight. When I got back to Donna and Harold's, the house was almost empty. The backyard looked like a war zone. Torn decorations, smeared cake, abandoned gifts. Aubrey sat on the porch swing, arms wrapped around herself, rocking slightly. She stood up when she saw me, eyes swollen and red. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. I waited. Finally, she found her voice. "I didn't mean for you to find out like that," she said, voice breaking. I didn't move. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen," she whispered. I still didn't move. After a long, heavy silence, she crumbled. "I'm scared, Caleb," she sobbed. "I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be enough." I stared at her, feeling the last frayed threads between us snap. "You already made your choice," I said, my voice low and flat. She reached out, desperate, but I stepped back. "I'll be there for the baby," I said. "But you and me? We're over." The words hung in the air, final and brutal. She collapsed onto the swing, sobbing into her hands. I turned and walked away again, not looking back. This time, there was no one chasing me. The days after the baby shower slid by like a bad dream that wouldn't let up. I didn't go back to our house. I stayed in a cheap motel on the edge of town, the kind of place where the bed creaked when you sat on it, and the bathroom fan buzzed constantly. The room smelled faintly of cigarette smoke no matter how long I left the window cracked. Every morning, I woke up to sunlight slanting through ugly mustard-colored curtains, my phone buzzing with messages I didn't answer. Aubrey called. She texted. She begged. At first, I didn't even read them. Then I started skimming. The words blurred together. "I'm sorry. Please come home. I made a mistake. We can fix this." Sometimes she'd leave long voicemails, her voice raw, telling me about her doctor's appointments, about how Micah was kicking harder now. Sometimes she'd just cry. I listened to every single one. And I did nothing. One afternoon, there was a knock at the motel door. I didn't move at first. Just sat there on the bed, staring at the blank TV screen. The knock came again, sharper this time. I got up and opened it. It wasn't Aubrey. It was Harold. He stood there in his pressed khakis and ironed polo shirt, holding a thick manila envelope in one hand like it was a weapon. "Mind if I come in?" he said, voice hard. I didn't answer. Just stepped aside and let him in. He looked around the room with a disgusted sort of expression, like the smell of stale smoke was personally offensive to him. Without sitting down, he tossed the envelope onto the bed. "Custody papers," he said shortly. "If you don't come to your senses, we're filing for full custody." I stared at the envelope. "You're kidding. Does it look like I'm kidding?" I stayed silent. Harold crossed his arms. "You abandoned your wife. You humiliated her. What kind of father does that?" Anger flared up, hot and sudden. "The kind of father whose wife invited her ex to his baby shower," I said tightly. Harold's face darkened. "She's pregnant and scared. And you left her alone." "She left me first," I said. The words sounded hollow, even to my own ears. Harold shook his head in disgust. "You're pathetic." He turned and walked out without another word. The door slammed behind him. I sat down heavily on the bed, staring at the envelope. My hands were trembling. I knew Harold had money. Knew he had connections. If he wanted to make my life hell, he could. The idea of not being able to see my son tightened something in my chest until it hurt to breathe. For the first time since the shower, I cried. Not loud, not messy, just silent, heavy tears slipping down my face as I sat there with the air conditioner humming and the weight of everything crushing me from all sides. I knew I couldn't stay there forever. The next morning, I went to a lawyer. Marlene Russo, downtown Scranton, tough as nails with a voice like gravel and the patience of a saint. She listened to everything without interrupting, her pen scratching steadily across a yellow legal pad. When I finally finished, she sat back in her chair and tapped the pen against the desk. "You screwed up," she said bluntly. I opened my mouth to argue, but she held up a hand. "You didn't hit her. You didn't abandon the baby. You walked away from a bad situation. The law's on your side, mostly. But it's gonna be messy. You ready for messy?" I nodded. "Good. Then let's get to work." The custody battle was exactly what Marlene promised. Messy, brutal, and exhausting. Aubrey didn't fight me. Harold did. He threw everything he had at me: private investigators, background checks, character witnesses. He tried to paint me as unstable, angry, unfit. He dug up every bad decision I'd ever made. The speeding tickets in my 20s. The bar fight I got into once when some drunk jerk grabbed Aubrey's ass. Even the fact that I'd grown up in foster care after my parents OD'd. He used it all. Aubrey sat through the hearings looking like a ghost, her hands trembling in her lap. She didn't testify against me. She didn't testify for me either. In the end, the judge saw through it. I got joint custody. 50-50. It wasn't a win. It didn't feel like anything close to a win. It felt like survival. Micah was born 3 weeks later. I almost didn't go to the hospital. I sat in my truck in the parking lot for 2 hours, staring at the entrance, sweating through my shirt, my hands slick on the steering wheel. Part of me didn't want to see her. Part of me couldn't stay away. In the end, I went inside. I found her alone in the hospital room, pale and tired and beautiful in a way that made my chest ache. She looked up when I came in. No anger. No resentment. Just tired. "He's here," she whispered. I crossed the room on legs that barely held me up. And there he was. Tiny, red-faced, swaddled in a blue blanket. He yawned, and it was the most perfect thing I'd ever seen. Aubrey handed him to me without a word. The weight of him in my arms was staggering. I looked down at my son and felt something inside me crack open. He didn't know about betrayal, or hurt, or broken promises. All he knew was warmth and safety. And I would die before I let anything take that from him. After that, things settled into a fragile, uneasy rhythm. Aubrey and I barely spoke except about Micah. Drop-offs and pickups were stiff and awkward. We smiled for Micah. We laughed for him. We pretended when we had to. But there was a wall between us now, thick and high and impossible to climb. I moved into a small 2-bedroom apartment on the other side of town. It wasn't much peeling wallpaper, cracked tiles, but it was home. I got a crib, painted a little mural of stars and planets on the nursery wall. Micah didn't care that the walls were crooked or the furniture secondhand. He cared that I held him when he cried, sang to him when he couldn't sleep, kissed his chubby cheeks when he laughed. He was mine, and he was enough. Zane didn't disappear right away. For a few months after Micah was born, I'd see his name pop up on Aubrey's phone when I dropped off the baby. I didn't ask. It wasn't my place anymore. But one evening, when I showed up early by accident, I saw Zane's truck parked out front. Through the front window, I saw him leaning close to Aubrey, his hand on her arm, his mouth too close to her ear. Micah was in a playpen nearby, babbling happily, oblivious. Something inside me snapped. I didn't storm in. I didn't cause a scene. I waited. And later that night, when I knew Zane would be alone, I found him at Mulligan's. He was at the bar, laughing with a buddy, tossing back shots. I sat down next to him. He looked over, smirked. Well, if it isn't, I cut him off. "You think you won?" I said quietly. He frowned, thrown off by my tone. I leaned closer. "You didn't." Then I smiled, small and cold. "Every time you see him, every time he smiles at you, or cries for me, or calls me dada, you'll know." Zane stared at me, the smugness draining out of his face. "You'll know you'll never be that for him," I said. I stood up and left. And I never saw Zane again. Life, after that night with Zane, didn't magically get better. It just kept moving. Most days blurred into each other: work, pick up Micah, fix dinner, baths, bedtime stories, collapsed exhaustion. Then repeat. Micah grew fast. One minute he was this tiny, fragile thing curled against my chest, and the next he was crawling across the living room, pulling down everything he could reach. He was stubborn like me, his little face screwing up in concentration when he tried to stack his toy blocks or yank himself up onto the couch. Every milestone felt like a victory and a punch to the gut at the same time. Because Aubrey wasn't missing it. She was there too, sharing the moments I used to think would be just ours. There were nights when I lay awake staring at the cracked ceiling of my apartment, listening to the creak of the radiator, wondering how the hell it had all fallen apart so fast. I thought about the way Aubrey used to look at me like I was the center of her world. When had that look shifted? When had it faded into something else? Maybe it hadn't been one moment. Maybe it had been a slow leak, the kind you don't notice until the whole damn boat's underwater. Maybe love just wasn't enough sometimes. Once, about 3 months after Micah was born, I ran into Donna at the grocery store. I was pushing Micah's stroller, distracted, trying to remember if we needed more formula. She appeared at the end of the aisle like a ghost, her hands tightening on the cart when she saw me. We froze for a second, just staring at each other. Then she walked toward me, her mouth set in a grim line. "He looks like you." she said, voice low. I nodded. Didn't trust myself to say anything. She bent over, smoothing a hand over Micah's fuzzy head. He's beautiful, she whispered. I swallowed hard. Tell Aubrey. Tell her I'm doing my best, I said finally. Donna's face softened, just a little. I will, she said. And then she was gone, pushing her cart away without another word. A few weeks later, Aubrey showed up at my apartment. Unannounced. It was late. Micah had just fallen asleep in his crib, and I was sitting on the couch in the dark, nursing a beer, letting the exhaustion settle in my bones. There was a knock, soft but insistent. I opened the door, and there she was, standing there in a hoodie and leggings, her hair pulled back, her face bare. She looked young. She looked tired. Can I come in? She asked. I stepped aside. She stood in the middle of my tiny living room, twisting her hands together. I'm not here to fight, she said. I didn't say anything. Just waited. She took a deep breath. I'm sorry, she said. The words rushed out like she was afraid she wouldn't be able to say them if she hesitated. I'm sorry I let him in. I'm sorry I hurt you. I'm sorry I made you doubt everything. I stared at her, trying to gauge if this was another performance, another way to smooth things over for appearances. But there was no anger in her eyes. No pride. Just sadness. And regret. I was scared, she whispered. Of being trapped. Of becoming like my parents. I thought if I kept one foot out the door, I could breathe. But all I did was burn everything down. She wiped her eyes roughly with her sleeve. I ruined it, she said. I know that. Still, I said nothing. She turned to leave, her shoulders slumping. Then she hesitated at the door. For what it's worth, she said, her voice cracking, you were always enough. The door clicked softly shut behind her, and I sat back down on the couch, the beer going warm in my hand, and stared into the dark. The days that followed were quieter. Not easier, just quieter. Aubrey didn't come by again. When we handed Micah off, we didn't linger. We didn't talk about the past. We just smiled at him, said goodbye, and turned away before the weight of it could crush us. I threw myself into work. Longer hours, side jobs, anything to keep the lights on and food on the table. Property management wasn't glamorous. Half the time it meant crawling under sinks, fixing toilets, chasing down tenants who thought rent was optional. But it paid the bills. And every 2 weeks, I got to scoop Micah into my arms, feel his tiny fist grab my shirt, hear him squeal dada, like I was the best thing in the world. Nothing else mattered. Not the sleepless nights. Not the bruised pride. Not the wreckage I walked through every day. Only him. Still, there were cracks. Moments I couldn't patch over no matter how hard I tried. Like the night Micah called Darren dada by mistake when I dropped him off. Aubrey froze. Darren froze. I smiled, tight and fake, and said it was fine. That it didn't matter. But it did. It mattered more than I could say. I drove home that night with my knuckles white on the steering wheel, biting the inside of my cheek so hard I tasted blood. I tried dating, once or twice. A woman from work. A friend of a friend. It never stuck. I'd sit across from them at some coffee shop or diner, listening to them talk about vacations and promotions and yoga classes, and I'd feel like I was watching life through dirty glass. I didn't know how to be that person anymore. I didn't know if I wanted to. Micah didn't care if I was single. He cared that I showed up, that I held him when he cried, that I knew which stuffed animal he couldn't sleep without. That was enough. For now, it had to be. One rainy Saturday, about a year after everything blew up, I found myself driving past the old neighborhood, past the house Aubrey and I had planned to buy, past the park where we used to sit and talk about baby names, past the coffee shop where we'd celebrated when we found out she was pregnant. Everything looked the same, but nothing was the same. I pulled over and just sat there for a while, the rain tapping soft against the windshield. Sometimes I wondered if I could have saved it if there was a version of me that could have seen the cracks earlier, patched them up before they split wide open. But most days, I knew better. Some things aren't meant to be saved. Some things are meant to teach you how to survive losing them. Months passed. Seasons changed. Micah started walking, then running. He babbled constantly, stringing together little half-sentences, and laughed at everything. He was the best part of my life and the hardest. Sharing him with Aubrey and Darren never stopped stinging. Darren was everywhere now. He picked Micah up from daycare sometimes. He went to doctor's appointments. Aubrey posted pictures of them all smiling together online. I saw the comments, what a beautiful family. Micah looked so happy. And every time, it felt like someone drove a nail a little deeper into my chest. I told myself it didn't matter. Micah knew who I was. That was what mattered. But deep down, I hated the idea that Zane had almost been Micah's stepdad. That Darren got to swoop in and wear the badge I had bled for. I hated it. But I swallowed it down and kept showing up. Because that's what real dads do. One afternoon, when Micah was about 2, I showed up early for pickup. Aubrey wasn't there. Darren was. He came outside with Micah on his hip, looking as casual as if he were handing over a bag of groceries. Micah saw me and squealed, squirming to get down. Dada, he shouted, stumbling toward me on his chubby legs. Darren hesitated, then set Micah down carefully. As Micah wrapped his arms around my legs, Darren cleared his throat. We're having a party next month. For Micah's birthday, he said. I nodded stiffly. Aubrey wants you to come, Darren added, almost grudgingly. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I knelt, scooped Micah into my arms, and stood up. I'll think about it, I said, my voice flat. Darren's mouth tightened into a fake smile. Micah loves having all his family together, he said. The way he said it, like I was some occasional visitor instead of his father, made my blood boil. But I just smiled tightly and walked away. That night, after putting Micah to bed, I sat on the couch in the dark, thinking about all the ways they had tried to erase me. First Zane, now Darren. Always smiling, always polite, pretending they were doing it for Micah's sake. And I realized something. I didn't need to fight them. I needed to outgrow them. The plan started small, simple, quiet. I filed the paperwork for a business license the next day. Morris Home Services, specializing in repairs, renovations, property management. I poured every extra hour, every ounce of energy into it. Late nights designing the website, weekends hustling jobs, building connections. At first, it was a struggle. Scranton wasn't exactly short on handyman services. But word got around. I was reliable, affordable, honest. And within a year, I had more work than I could handle. I hired 2 guys, then 4. By the time Micah turned 3, Morris Home Services was one of the top-rated businesses in the county. I wasn't scraping by anymore. I bought a house. A real one. Nothing fancy, a 3-bedroom fixer-upper on a quiet street, but it was mine. Fresh paint, a backyard big enough for a swing set, a bedroom just for Micah with rocket ship wallpaper. I didn't invite Aubrey to see it. She found out another way. One evening, when I went to drop Micah off, she met me at the door. She looked around at my truck, the new one, not the beat-up junker she remembered. At my clothes, cleaner, nicer. At me. You look good, she said, a little too casually. Thanks, I said, shrugging. She hesitated. I heard you started your own business, she added. I nodded. Yeah, keeps me busy. There was something tight around her eyes. Something she didn't say. I smiled, polite and distant, handed her Micah's bag, kissed Micah's forehead, and turned to leave. A week later, Darren called me, which was unusual. I answered, wary. Hey, Caleb, he said, trying for friendly. Listen, I was wondering if you had any time next month. The house needs some repairs. Aubrey said you're doing really well with your company, and, well, you know the place better than anyone. I could hear the tension in his voice, the forced friendliness. I sat back in my chair, smiling to myself. They needed me. After everything, after the betrayal, the humiliation, the way they had tried to replace me, they needed me. And here's the thing. I could have said no. I could have laughed and hung up. But real revenge isn't loud. It isn't cruel. It's living so well they have no choice but to choke on it. Sure, I said, keeping my voice easy. I'll send you my rates. There was a pause. I knew Darren was used to favors. Free help. The perks of being the new guy. My standard rate's $150 an hour, I said cheerfully. Emergency repairs are extra. Another pause. Longer this time. Right, he said, voice tight. We'll get back to you. They never did. And that was the real win. Now, every time Aubrey saw the truck parked in front of my house, every time Micah came home chattering about the swing set Daddy built, every time she saw me thriving without her, that was the revenge. Not cruel. Not angry. Just better. Micah's 4th birthday rolled around. The party was at my house this time. Friends, family, neighbors, even Donna showed up, carrying a huge tray of lasagna. Micah ran around the yard, laughing, frosting smeared across his face. At one point, I looked up and saw Aubrey standing by the fence, watching. She wasn't smiling. She looked sad. Maybe she realized what she'd thrown away. Maybe she didn't. It didn't matter anymore. Micah called for me, tugging on my hand. I scooped him up, kissed his messy cheek, and laughed. My life wasn't perfect. It was better, and I didn't need anyone else to know it but him.